Hello, this video is about ontology modeling in TopBraid Edge. This is a longer video that discusses different options. There is at least 3 other videos that give you a short introduction to ontology modeling. They are all linked in the description below, and I encourage you to take a look at them first before watching this video. Let's switch to TopBraid Edge, and by the way, here are the videos that you could watch first. And let's start from the home page. And from the home page, let's go to one of the example ontologies that you could download from samples from TopBraid's website. So here you'll see a tree with various classes. And to create a new class, you click on any of the existing classes. There's always be thing at the root. And then you click on this button to create a new class. Or you could click on a parent class and right click and pick this create subclass off. So below this class hierarchy panel, there's a panel that shows properties that have been defined for each class. You also see them on the class form, for example here. And you could create new ones either from the form itself on clicking this plus button, or you could create them in this property group panel, which gives you a little bit more options because it lets you define a group under which those properties will show up in the forms for assets that have this class as a type. You'll see both inherited properties and properties that are declared specifically for this class. For example, here you see the class reference date entity. We have a label, types, and status, and a few dates. And these are declared properties for it. And then we go to a subclass. We see that these are the inherited properties that comes from the reference data entity, and then it has its own declared property, FIPS code. So on a class form, you see them separately, and in a property groups form, you see all inherited and directly declared together. So as I mentioned, to create a new one, you just click on this button and you get the dialog. There's one option here is to show identifiers or don't show identifiers. By default, it's switched off, and you just type the name, such as let's say a country has capital, and we're going to use it as a string. So set cardinality, select property group. If you selected a property group from the panel, then the property will be in that group already. And it gets created. When you show identifiers, this is usually important to do when you want to create some complex path, because then here you could actually type a path, for example, and you could say something like, let's say, so this doesn't really make sense because country is not relationship, but if it was a relationship, you could have done something like this. So you could define properties for complex paths, not just for things that are directly connected to the resources of this type. I'm gonna cancel out from here for a moment. Another thing you could do by way of creating, you could copy existing property shapes from another class. And what you're creating here, actually what we've created with a capital, we've created a property shape. When you're doing ontology modeling in TopBraid Edge, you are typically using Shackle. And if you want to know more about Shackle, search for it to find, it's a W3C World Wide Web standard. You could also go to TopCoordinate's website and go under technology, and there's a Shackle page where you could have a lot of information, including links to the standard tutorial and so on. So when you're copying from another class, uh, instead of creating a brand new property or using a brand new property, you're just taking already existing property shapes and associating it with your class. For example, here in ISO countries, we have a shape for as border with that is connected to ISO country. If I wanted to copy it, I'll do something like this. Add existing property definition, and then I could start typing its Q name. So I need a prefix. So I saw country and has border with. I'm going to select it. And it's just added a property shape that's already existed, just basically linking it with my class. I'm going to go through more of the various options that you see on this forms. But before I do that, I want to talk about other ways in which you could create ontologies. So far we've been talking about how you could use this editor application and create classes and properties. But you could also bring your ontologies in through various import functions. For example, if you have a spreadsheet with some data and you want to use structure of the spreadsheet to generate property shapes for a given class, you could select a class and then go on the modify and say add property shapes from spreadsheet columns. In one of the videos that is linked below, the one that discusses reference data sets, there's a little demo of this feature. You could also add property shapes from the Wikidata, which is a knowledge graph with a lot of information. And it has information about many things in the world, and there is a model for each of those entities. You could take a look at help accessible from this question mark menu, then user guides, and then working with ontologies, and see how to add properties from Wikidata sample. And I think we also have a blog describing that, so you could look at blogs on TopCoordinate's website. Another option that you have, you could derive property shapes from data that is already in TopBraid Edge. If you take a look at the video for creating crosswalks, that option is available, is demoed there, but it's kind of a small option, small demo when you select a class and you point to data, and a new property shape is automatically added from the data, because the data has that property and the property is not defined in the ontology. There is also a feature that will create new classes as well as properties for those classes. And that's accessible by clicking on the home panel, a home icon, which brings information about ontology itself. And there's modify option here for deriving missing classes. And it asks you to pick NASIC collection that has data, and then you'll go from there. So let me show you how that that works. The asset collection that we will choose must have this ontology included in it. So I have here a data graph with some entertainment data, and it is has information about people, which are actors, and movies they um, played in or directed in. In order to use this data to derive the model for it, I need to do a couple of things. I need to include my ontology in it. So that has to happen. And here's my enterprise ontology. And I actually, since I already have ontology that defines the classes, and that's included as well, I need to remove it. Otherwise, TopBraid Edge would not know that the classes and properties are missing. So once I do this, I could go back to my ontology. I'm going to start the workflow to create this example. And now I'm on the home page here, and I will select derive missing classes. And now entertainment data is available to me as an asset collection that contains data because my ontology is included in it. And that's pretty much it. You see that I got some new classes, person, actor, and you see some properties that have been added for all those classes. When we're doing something like this, TopBraid Edge doesn't know that, for example, actor is a subclass of a person. It will only find the missing classes and will create properties for these classes. So any subclass relationship you will then need to create yourself. So that's one way of automatically deriving ontology. You may also have already RDF files with the ontology definition. And if so, you could use the import tab to import your RDF files. If you have multiple RDF files, which happens sometimes, that have modular ontologies connected to each other using all import statement, and you want to preserve that structure in TopBraid Edge, so you want to have an equivalent ontology in TopBraid Edge for each of those files. The important thing to do is create an asset collection for each of those files, and then on the settings you could give an external graph URI corresponding to URI of the file. This way, TopBraid Edge will know how to redirect the import statements, and also when you export such ontologies on the export when files are created, they will preserve the URIs of the original files as opposed to the URIs that are given automatically assigned by Edge. This is not under the user control. The URIs that when you create an ontology, Edge will assign the URI and you cannot make any changes to it. So this is, and after you establish that, then you could bring your files in by just using import RDF. Of course, if you're not wanting to mimic the same structure and you just want to create one large ontology out of module, out of many files, then you could just load all of them into a single ontology in TopBraid Edge. The external ontologies that you're using may be not in SHACL, but rather in RDFS or owl. If that's the case, after you load them, you could go to the transform tab and you convert all axioms to shackle. This is necessary in order to work with instance data in TopBraid Edge. So if you want to manage instances in TopBraid Edge, classes and properties need to be connected using shackle. Properties need to be defined using shackle. On the way out, it is also possible to convert ontology and export it back as OWL file or as RDFS schema file. TopBraid Edge will do this automatically for you, and these are the options. All right, so let's go back to the ontology and go through a few of the options on the property forms. So let's take a look at some of the options here. So you could see you could create a description for a property. This will show on the tooltip on the form when you're working with instance data. You could potentially enter a GraphQL field name. This is not required. Sometimes it's needed if the property name contains some characters that are illegal in GraphQL, but typically it's not needed. Deactivated is if you're using already existing ontology, for example, ontology shipped with TopBraid Edge, and you want to deactivate one of the properties, then you switch that to true. This is demoed in video about configuring asset information that you could take a look at. Group, that's the section that this property will belong to. So, for example, order, that's the order in which this field will display on the form within that section. And you could enter the order like this. And let's put it with, so you see, if I want to move it after, I could also move it, and Edge just change the order value. So the order value doesn't have to be an integer. It could be other numbers as well. Viewer and editor, it's how property will be displayed and what widget will be used to edit it. Typically, you don't enter anything here. TopBraid Edge will pick the most appropriate display based on the type of the property. So for example, if it's a date, you get the date picker. If it has HTML as a data type, you'll get a rich text. If it's a relationship, then there will be autocomplete. There are some cases where you may want to have a specialized viewer or specialized editor, and you could take a look and see what's available here. But typically, you will not enter anything here. You could make a property read-only, and then it will not be editable. And you could also mark it as hidden. The difference between deactivated and hidden is that in both cases, they will not show up on the forms, but the validation will still happen for the hidden property, while for deactivated, there will be no validation. It will be as if property have never existed. Speaking of the validation, you could change severity of errors. So if there is any issues with data for this property, for example, let's say I said that the capital is required, and I have some country without a capital, so that will be an issue. or the data type is not string but something else. So you could modify the severity here. By default, the severity is always violation, but you could change it to just info and warning. And you could provide a message that will be displayed if there is an issue, instead of the default messages that are generated by TopBraid Edge. So this is done for the property as a whole. Alternatively, you could do it for specific constraints. For example, you could say that the min count, if it's violated, it's just a warning. But let's say max count, if it's violated, then it is, sorry, it's the info. So there's that option. You see how this works? Basically, it hangs a value on this min count 1 triple. It uses RDF plus style of reification. You could do something like this for any of your own properties. So if, for example, you want to say that some additional values need to be can be entered for the capital, you could specify that. This is done using this reifiable by option. And the way it works, you create a node shape. Node shapes are similar to classes. Each class in TopBraid Edge is also a node shape, but node shapes don't have instances. So you could create a node shape, for example, if I want to say that the capital was a capital of the country from some date to some date. So I could create a node shape with those properties. And then I'll say it has from date, and it's a date, and to date, but I'm not gonna spend time doing that. So now when you go back to the capital, you could say that it's reifiable by this effective date shape. And when your users enter information about capital, they will also be able to enter information about dates, just like I was able to enter this information about min count equal 1. Indexed is another option if you want TopBraid Edge to automatically sequence or order values of the property, and the order starts with 0 and gets incremented, then you'll say index equal true. So that's another option. And then the rest of the options here, there are some inferences. One is default value. You could specify a certain value to be as a default for the, let's say, capital. Users would still be then able to edit the capital field, overriding the default. But if there is no value, TopBraid Edge would use the default. And then values is used for the inference rules. Again, the videos that are linked in the description show how to create those inference rules. It's available under Modify, Create Property Value Rule from Template. And you could see how to do this in one of the videos. Everything I'm showing in this video is also described in the user guide for working with ontologies. So you could always go there and see more details. In Anthology Editor, you will also always see a source code panel. So if you want to see exactly how this information that we've been entering, how it's captured, you can click on the source code panel, and you could also edit the source code panel. It is syntax directed editing, so you won't be able to make syntax error here. If you make a change, then you could save changes. It's a pretty nice editor. Finally, once you finish your modeling and you have all your classes and properties, if you are to work with instances of these classes again in TopBraid Edge, it's important to click on this home icon and make sure that the classes for which you want to work with instances are declared as public classes. Otherwise, they will not be available for instance creation. For the classes themselves, there's also a few options here. So one option is to make a class abstract. In this case, you will not be able to create its instances. You will only be able to create instances of subclasses. You could also hide the class from display. And when you hide the class, it's not shown in the classes tree, and it's not shown in the asset type navigator in other asset collections. There are some scripting options, and we have a video about active data shape scripting in one of our quick Grok videos. And finally, if you want to model in TopBraid Edge using all axioms, it is also possible. There are widgets here, so you could do equivalent classes when you select the class, or you could switch to Al Manchester Syntax Editor, and then you'll be able to enter Manchester syntax expressions here. So that's a possibility if you need to create all restrictions. Sometimes you may want to capture additional properties for the classes themselves or for the properties themselves. So this form is essentially pre-built, and everything you see here, all the sections are pre-built. So if you need to have additional properties, for example, alternative label for the class, or a comment property, or anything, description property, or anything like that, you need to use the same approach as I showed with reification. You will need to create a node shape that has a property that you want to capture for a class. Let's say let's call it class view. And let's add acronym, for example. It's going to be a string. Now we will need to target it to say what it is applicable to. By the way, we also could have done that with effective date as well. So we'll have to say what it is applicable to and we're going to say that it's applicable to any class. Now, when we click on the class, we'll see the acronym property. And it shows under other properties section, but we could have created a special section for it or put it in this definition associated with this definition section. Now this is displayed all on one form because I have merged view selected here. So if there's multiple views, I want to merge properties from all views. If this is off, then I will be having drop down. So this is a standard all class view, and this is my alternative class view. And now I have only acronym here because that's the only thing I defined in this alternative view. But selecting a merged view is the best if this is your requirement to have additional properties for the class itself or for the property shape. The Anthology Editor also has some alternative layout. If you have a relatively small ontology, you may want to use a simple ontology layout. So instead of a class hierarchy that some people view as too complex, you'll just have a list of classes. And there's going to be no property group panel because you could always create properties directly here. So that's one option. Another option is classes and instances. And that has class hierarchy. And under each class, there is a possibility to create some instances. In TopBraid Edge, the best practice is to keep your instances in a different asset collection from an ontology. For example, a taxonomy, enumeration, data graph, reference data set as appropriate. Sometimes there are cases and reasons to keep your instances directly in the ontology. So this provides you with this possibility. It should be a limited number of instances that are relatively stable and don't have extra information, but basically primarily have a label and comment. And that gives you, I think, a decent overview of the various features in Anthology Editor in TopBraid Edge. And again, for more information, take a look at the user guide and you will see all additional features displayed, described in great detail. Thank you for watching this video.